Azure AWS will manage server for us, so the developers will not have to take that burden of managing servers. So it is no servers to provision or manage. So also it is scalable with usage. So for example, if our services are not in use, so we'll not have to pay for that. For example, there are some applications that will hit more requests in certain time period. So in that certain time, it will scale itself by it will be handled by Azure itself, and when it is idle, we will not have to pay for it. So that's what serverless means. So if we look into the serverless event processing, so what it does is uh, it will some events will be triggered by the devices, which will be solved to the event hubs, and the event hubs will then trigger the functions that are Azure functions, and which Azure functions will give some output that can be manipulated as we want. So that we may write it to Cosmos DB, or we may add it up to the storage queue, and we can do whatever we want with it. So it is all in the one cycle. So let's talk more about Azure functions. So we all may be familiar with the term function. So function is just a small piece of code. So what Azure function will do is it will run some piece of function, piece of code called function. So without worrying about the deployment thing, without worrying about the server setup, without worrying about the server configurations, so we will just create Azure function and run it. That's all. And we will run it on the updated cloud infrastructure provided by the our cloud providers, Azure or AWS. So it is also a great solution for processing bulk data and integrating systems with IoTs and other devices or other APIs or other app services that Azure provides. So it is a serverless and event driven, as we have talked about serverless, and it is event driven. So Azure functions are event driven. That means to trigger those functions, we will need some event to occur. So we can also say them as nano services, because uh, a function is Azure function is just one function at a time. So we can create multiple Azure functions to create nano services out of it. So if we look into the features of Azure function, so it's a serverless application, and it also supports different language. Sorry about that. So it also supports different languages like C Sharp, Java, JavaScript, Python, and PowerShell. So even if there is even if these languages are not of your knowledge, so the language that you work on will provide some mediator to communicate with the serverless application. So we will just be paying for the price. We will just be paying for the uses that we use, and we can also bring our own dependencies on this Azure function. That means that we may have other dependencies except of the application, like there may be JavaScript code depending upon some npm packages, node modules, or it may be dependent on some Nougat packages, that's some third-party packages. So we can just integrate them to our application as well. And it also provides integrated security. So that means that in case of HTTP triggered functions, we can implement OAuth providers to secure the HTTP triggered function. So we can use OAuth providers such as Azure Active Directory, Facebook, Microsoft account, Google or Twitter. And the another thing is it have simplified integration. That means we can easily integrate our Azure function with other Azure services that are provided as software as a service in Azure. Also, it have flexible development. So that means that we can set up continuous integration and deploy our code through GitHub, Azure Dev Ops services, or other some development tools. And the other beautiful thing is it is open source, so we can find the code for the runtime of this in GitHub itself. So if you look into the price, for the serverless function. So is my screen visible?
Yes, it is. You're showing your slide at right now.
Oh, okay, okay. So I will share it again. So if you look into the Azure pricing calculator for Azure functions, so we can see that it have around 400,000 GBs of execution per second, and 1 million executions are free. That's per month. So that means we'll not have to pay for this service. So if we want to increase this, let's say we want around 2 million executions per second per month. Yes. So we'll just have to pay 2 cents. So that is very less. So it's almost free but not free. Yeah. So if we look into the process of how Azure functions are triggered, so there will be some thing that will trigger an event, that may be a app server or a user or some other event triggers. So it will trigger an event, and the function in the code container will execute with after getting after getting a trigger, and it will give an output as task or tasks known as results. So these results can be input to some other function as well, that is known as binding. So we'll talk about that in next slide. So what are triggers? So triggers are something that cause function to run. So it defines how a function is invoked, and every function must have exactly one trigger. So without any, no, if there is no any trigger, then there is no use of having Azure function. So we would like to have at least one uh, trigger to execute function, trigger Azure function. So associated data, that means the data can be provided as the input to the function. So there are different types of triggers that Azure function provides us, that we can bind with Azure function. So they are like time trigger. So time trigger will uh, be we'll set a time trigger, and it will execute at that particular time only. So it is like a scheduler job that we use in Windows services and other services. So it's just like scheduler. And other thing is blob trigger. So whenever a blob will be detected in blob storage of the Azure, then we can trigger that Azure function. So that's what blob trigger is. And event hub trigger, so it will deliver it will be delivered to an Azure event hub, that is Azure service called Azure event hub. So whenever event will be triggered, it will be queued to the Azure event hub, and will be then executed by the uh, Azure function. And the other thing is HTTP trigger. So the HTTP trigger is something that will be triggered whenever we will have a HTTP call. And other thing is queue trigger. So it whenever a message box called Azure Storage Queue will receive a queue trigger, then it will trigger the Azure function. So other thing, generic wave hook. It is also a wave hook for the HTTP request that can be binded with the different webhooks in the JavaScripts or GitHub webhooks. So the other thing is service bus trigger. So this is also a service bus queue of the Azure storage. So whenever we'll get message in that queue, we can trigger a Azure function. So binding, what is binding? So there are basic two concepts of the function. Azure function is triggers and bindings. So bindings is something that we bind to the uh, function. So that they are the input data and the output data. So they can be there or they cannot be there. So I mean they are optional. So we may or may not have bindings in a function, but it needs to have a trigger. So input binding is the data that our function receives, and output binding is the data that our function sends. So the output binding of the function can be the input binding of the another function in nano services. So such things are called durable functions. Whenever we will have uh, multiple functions communicating with each other, message passing through each other, so they are called durable functions. And there is lot to talk about durable functions. So due to our time constraint, I will explain this a little bit, but you can get this document online, and this is very good stuff to read. So it is just an extension of Azure function. That means Azure function is just one function. So dual functions will have multiple functions communicating with each other, creating a nano services, microservices. So it allows us to write stateful functions in serverless compute. So the thing is, since we are saying the functions are serverless, so there must be a question that where does it saves the function, where does it stores the function, where does it execute the function, where does it store the states of the functions. So the thing is, every time the function use we create a function, Azure function, it will create Azure storage. So Azure storage will be the place where it will be stored, and it will save all the states of the functions, so that we may resume the function. So it uses Azure storage. So let's move into the demo to see all those stuff. uh, so if we go into the Azure portal, then we will. So here we will have app named function app. So if we can create a function app in the portal Azure itself, or we can also code it using Visual Studio or VS Code, or any other IDE that you prefer. So let's create first using Azure portal itself, and let me associate it with the resource group. So this is the one that I've created, and let me name this Azure function as demo function. So I want to run this in .NET Core 3.1, and I want to have this region as Central US. Okay, so that's all we'll have to do to create an Azure function. It will take a couple of minutes maybe. So it's deploying the Azure app function now. This will create an environment for the Azure app, sorry, Azure function. It usually take 1 to 2 minutes to deploy. Okay, so it's deployed. So now I can go to this resource and create an Azure function. So I can either develop locally, or I can add Azure function in the dot I mean portal Azure itself. So when we are creating a function, we will have the options that which trigger do we want to use for this function. So as I said, we need to have at least one trigger for the function. Let's say I would like to use timer trigger. So this is a simple one, and let me call this, let me be this timer trigger one, and this is the schedule time when we want to trigger this function. So it is in cron expression, so we can, so it says every 5 minutes right now, so we can change this expression. So that's it. So it will create a Azure function for us, which will be triggered every 5 minutes. And beauty is we can code and test in cloud itself in here. So we can have all the codes. So since I have developed this in .NET Core, so I can use C#, uh, in this function. And if you have chosen other languages like JavaScript or PHP, so you will have to code in the same language. So here we can write our logic in this function, and this will be triggered every 5 minutes. So this is the basic example of how to create a trigger function from the um, portal itself. Now let's try doing this. I mean, we will not be doing this in a real scenario. So this is just testing one. So we will, let's move into the development, how we develop it in the using Visual Studio. So if you are new to Visual Studio, we will have to install Azure Development Platform for the Visual Studio, and after that we'll have the option to create a project of Azure function. So here it is, and so while creating a function, it will ask us for the trigger that we want to use for this application. That is, here are the triggers. So I have chosen HTTP trigger, that is on every HTTP request, uh, our Azure function will be triggered. So I have already done that stuff. So I just the way that I showed. So what this function does is it will monitor GitHub for me. That means whenever there will be commits on GitHub repository, that is my repository, I would like to have that logs in my application. So I have already deployed my application in Azure, that is demo web app. So this is a app which will give me the data whenever someone will commit in my repository. So I will create Azure function which is completely independent from this web application, and which will be triggered on every commit that will be made on the repository, and it will save that data in the database, and this will give me the result in UI, this application. Which the one thing is Azure function and this web app service are completely independent application, and we'll communicate. We will use them as background. I will use them as a background service. So while we create Azure function, we will have to give a function name. So this is the function name for this uh, Azure function, and this is the only one function it will have. And we can also use authorization, that I said earlier, that we can use authorization like Azure directory or other stuff as well. So now right now we want to use it in function level. So we will come into this later, how it will authorize in function level. And here we can say what request will it take. So it is get or post. So let's say it will just take both of them, get and post. And here we are doing some logging stuff, and we will get the payload of the request in here, that is in the body of the request, and we will save that in our database. So this is the Azure function that I have created. Now I want to deploy this to the Azure, which is very easy using Visual Studio. So I will just do publish. So I will create a new app in Azure, which will be, you can choose any of this, Linux or Windows or container. So I will just choose Windows for now, default one. So this will give us, if we have already resource created in the Azure web portal. If not, then we will have to create it. So let me name this GitHub monitoring app, and this will use Azure function group hosted in Central US. Let this be consumption, and as I said that it will use an Azure storage. So I have 3 storages in my account, so I will just use AZ function storage. Let's create an app in Azure. And this will also take some time, maybe 1 to 2 minutes. And while doing this, let me, so now what we will do is I have this underscore demo in GitHub. So I will bind this Azure function in the webhook of this repository. That means whenever, what I want to do is whenever there will be a commit in this repository, I would like to have it, I would like this trigger, I mean webhook to trigger the function. So for that we will have to give our URL of Azure function here. Okay, so here it creates Azure function app, and now let me finish this. So it will deploy now.
Uh, just a time check, Saroj. We only have 5 minutes, eh?
Okay, Pradeep, sure. I think it will take that much only. So it should create an, sorry. So yes, it just created GitHub monitoring app for us. And if we look into this, we'll have our function in here, GitHub monitor. That is what my function name is. If I go here, so here is the function name, GitHub monitor. So this is the function name, and it is HTTP trigger. And if we go into this, we will have function keys. So this function key is used. Seems like it is still. So we can also use this monitor, that is application insight, to monitor the hits in this function. So here we have value that we will require, since we have function level authentication, so we will require this value to communicate with this function. So let me go to the overview and get this function URL. So here we will have the API slash GitHub monitor. So it's simply a API that have just one function or one API. So with the function code to get authenticated. So we will just copy this and paste it in our webhook. And then I want to do this for just the push event, and I will create a webhook. Now here we have just one commit until now. So what I want to do now is I want to go to this project code, and I want to edit this file, and want to save this with commit saying so. On committing this, it will trigger, so HTTP trigger we have applied, so it will trigger the Azure Function app and will store data in our database, from which we will pick data and show in our application. Let's see the status. Yes, so it is success. So it says is checked, means it should have saved the data. Maybe it may be taking some time. It is default function. Okay. Correct. So it have posted the value. So I'm not sure what happened. That's what happens when you show demo. So the basic idea here is to use trigger independent of the application, and it will run as a service uh, and store data in our database, which we can use in our application. So Pradeep, do I have time or that's it?
So
Yeah, I think I will have to wrap up since
yeah,
we
let's
have
wrap up
lifetime.
within a minute.
Yeah, if there are any questions, I would like to take them.
Meanwhile, Madan, if you're there, let's set up. Looks like there are no questions, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much, Saroj, for your session. Yeah. So the
Thank
next session is from us, Madan Sir. Uh, let's hear directly from him.
Hello. Yeah, is my screen visible?
Not so far, Madan. It's blank. It's
Okay,
black.
let me try once again.
Yeah.
Mm, yeah, stop. Okay, let me share my whole desktop. Just let me know when and everyone can see my screen. Yeah, now is it?
By the way, your voice is quite low, Madan.
Okay, sure.
Yeah.
Uh, is it okay now?
Still, I think it's better. Yeah, it's better.
Okay, yeah. So the screen is visible now?
Yes, it is.
Okay, thanks. I hear some kind of echo.
Madan, please unmute yourself. Sorry.
Yeah, hello?
Yes,
Yeah,
we can hear you.
yeah, I still hear some echo. Let me
Is
check.
it?
Yeah. Mm, just give me a minute. Let me reconnect this. Hello. Hello.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, yeah. Now it's good. So let me start my presentation. Hello, everyone. It's for my introduction. So I'm Madansa. I work as a cloud solution architect here in Nepal. So I work at Jenny Solution. So today I'll be presenting you about Azure Cognitive Service. So it's a AI service that's been provided by Azure as a managed service. So so it's a pay-per-use service. So you will pay for what you use within the service. So for the today's session, I'll show you a demo based on the text sentiment. So we'll provide text to the cognitive service, and it will based on the text that we have provided. It will send us the sentiment score. So when I say sentiment score, so it's like it will like provide a score in between 0 to 1. So when 1 is the positive score and 0 is the negative score and 0.5 is the like neutral score. So this can be used to like uh, provide the sentiment of our tweets, Facebook posts, something like those. Yeah. So let me start my session. So today I'll be covering these topics. So first I'll go with the introduction to cognitive service. Then I'll do a quick demo based on the browser where I'll just provide make some post request to the uh, cognitive service via API calls. Then I'll show you how you can run the text analytics service. So this whole application will be hosted on the Azure function that Saroj previously talked about. So this will be my overall session today. So let me go with the introduction to cognitive service. So let's talk about what basically cognitive service means. Like cognitive service basically is a means like it provides a very easier medium for people those who don't have like the expertise in machine learning to like easily have consume those services. So cognitive service is the collection of APIs and SDKs. So everything has been managed by the provider, like in this case Azure, and you just have to make API calls and provide your data, and you can provide it on the Azure JSON format. So all you need to do is do a post request, and you'll get a JSON formatted output where you'll get the all data based on the analysis done on the backend. So there are various kind of cognitive services that Azure provides. So these are based on visions, speech, language, knowledge, and search. So I have a picture. Sorry for the poor quality of the picture. I just copied it from Google, so it's not that good. So these are the vertices on which Azure provides cognitive service. So we have vision, speech, language, knowledge, and search. So in the vision section, we have computer vision. So computer vision is where like we provide image to the AI, then it will do analysis on those images. And in the face section, it will just detect the face of some particular person or object. And emotions, it will just calculate all the emotions that the picture is showing. So, and then we have speech, where it's all about speech to text and text to speech, where like it's more about the language analysis, and in the so it's more like a speech kind of like analysis, mostly based on speech. And the today's demo is more focused on the language, where we'll do the text analysis. And under this topic, we have language understanding, web language, and linguistic analysis as well. So in the knowledge area, it's more like knowledge-based section, where like based on the knowledge we provide, it will do some analysis. And finally in the search area, it's like doing the search using the Bing search platform that Microsoft has. Okay, so let me just go through the quick demo. For this purpose, I need a cognitive service key. So I already have one. So if you guys want to check it out, I can just share that with you guys. Just give me a minute. Yeah. So here's the key. So it's more like it gives us the permission to make calls to those APIs. So this is the API call. So this is the key. I'll just shortly paste in the URL. So yeah, this is the so let me show you how it works. So like this is the main page where like we have all the list of all the cognitive services. Okay, sorry. So I'm just going to work on text analysis because that's what we are going to do. Like the key that I have provided is only for text analysis. Okay, yeah, so I have it over here. And like Azure, like we consume resource based on different regions. So like my service is hosted in Singapore, so it's Southeast Asia. So I'll be selecting that particular region. So now I'm okay here. So if I paste it, so let's go with the sentiments, right? So let me show you how it works. Okay. So I have already. Yeah, so over here, if I show you, so I have already given my key over here. So this will be used to make the API call to the, and this is my data that it will be used. So let me show over here. So this is the sentiment one. So I have provided a text value of sad and happy. So even I have a certain text that is a neutral text. So it doesn't have any kind of emotions on it. So if I go and do the same, so it will just give me the output. So if you see over here, like for the first text, which has the word sad, so it's giving me the score of 0.05. So it definitely means it's a negative sentiment. So that this particular text has a negative sentiment. So if I go into this particular second text that I have provided, so it gives me a score of 0.6. So it's more than 0.5. So it's a positive sentiment. So if I go into the third text that has provided, so it's a neutral one. So it's giving me a 0.5. So we'll be working, I'll be doing a demo based on these sentiments, but there are other cognitive, like text-based cognitive service, like it's a detect language. So this particular service will detect the language that is being used. So if I just go over here, so if you see over here and just if you see the output, so you can see the language is Spanish for this second language. And so if you see over here as a first, so if I go into like entities, so I have provided like some keywords, and like it will, based on those words, it will give me the detailed list. So if I go into the search, so for like, so I have given the text for like COVID, so it is giving me a detailed link to the COVID. So I have like for a Nirmala case, so it's giving me, so I have a text provided for justice for Nirmala Pant, and like it is providing me with the detailed link of what that particular case. Even for like our prime minister, so you can see the details of KP Sharma Oli based on this particular text that I have provided, like sentence that I have provided. So that this is how it works. So like if you want to like test it out, you can also do it based on the like the key that I have shared with you, and then the link. So I'll then continue with my presentation. So I just want to talk to you about the text analysis API. So basically, it's a AI service where you provide submit your text, and it will do analysis on the text, and it will provide some kind of data based on the processing it does. So the information that you like the information that you get after the processing your data will be based on like it will identify the language that is being used of the text, discover the sentiments, either it's a negative sentiment, positive sentiment, or it's a neutral one. And it can also detect the key phrases, like the important words within those texts. And then it can also like detect the important entities, like in our case, like it detected COVID-19, Prime Minister of Nepal, KP Oli. So all those like key entities, and based on those, it will provide us with the output. And if the score is in between 0 to 1, so where 0 is, as I told you earlier, 0 is negative and 1 is positive, and 0.5 is neutral. So all we need to do is make a API call from the browser. So in the production environment, we'll do a API call based on our application, like using our code. So we'll do a API call to the cognitive service, and we'll get a output in a JSON format. So I'll yeah, and so this is all the basic introduction to text analysis. And so for the demo that I am working on, this is the architecture here. So as earlier, Sarojda has presented on function, Azure function. So I don't think I'll be going deep into the Azure functions. But so one of the component within this architecture is Azure function. So it will be used to like host our application. So our application will be hosted in an Azure function, which will make an API call to the cognitive service. So if you see over, this is, sorry. So this, Azure function will make a call to cognitive service. So here, like the main thing is how do we get the input to the Azure function, and how do we like to get the output? So as earlier, Saroj, I talked about bindings, right? So we will be using binding to like bind the input queue, and then we'll be using the binding functionality features to like output the results to the output queues. So like we have totally we have like 4 queues. So one queue is like an input queue where all the text will be stored, and then the Azure function will pull those text from the input queue, and then like it will forward those queues to the cognitive service. Once it gets the result from those cognitive service, it will push those results to the API queues based on the score. So if the score is positive, it will be pushed to the positive queue. If the score is negative, it will be pushed to the negative queue. And if the score is neutral, it will be pushed to the neutral queue. So for the demo, what we need to create is first we need a text analytics API. So it's a API service that we'll be using. So it's a part of a cognitive service. Then we'll create a Azure function. So where our whole application will be hosted. And then we'll create queues, which will be used as a buffer to store our text or documents. And then we'll make an API call to the cognitive service, and then we push those results to the destination queues. So this is the workflow for the Azure function. So what happens is like whenever there is a queue, there is a text or a document that arrives on the queue, Azure function will like pull the text from the queue and then send it to the make a post request or API call to the cognitive service. And then once the cognitive service processes the text on its backend, it will provide the results or as a JSON format to the function. And then the function will evaluate based on the score that it has provided, whether it's a positive sentiment or neutral sentiment or a negative sentiment. So based on that, it will push it to the respective queue, and ultimately, and we'll get the results on our queues. Okay, so that's a demo. So let me just walk you through the code that I have for this application. So like this is my application code. So in this case, let me just show you how it works. So in this case, it's like getting the document from the queue. And so if I go over here, so this is the binding that we have done. So this is for the input. So like we'll get the input from this particular queue that I have named. So this is the name of the queue that will be used as an input for our text. And then the connection type that for like the function will be triggered by various services. So in this case, the function that we have, it will be triggered by queues. So in this case, so the name of the queue that will be used to trigger the service, the Azure function will be quantum hack dash input queue. And then the connection type is Azure web job storage. So this is the connection type that we need to define with the queue service. So the direction here is the in, and then for the output queues, like based on our result, like for positive feedback, negative feedback, and the neutral, we have the direction for out. So when I say out, like it is for the like output services. So that's how the binding will work. And in this particular case, so like in this code snippet, what is happening is like it is taking the output from the input, like the text is an input from this particular queue, and then it is making a call to the get sentiments function. So if I go over here, so this is the get sentiment function. So it's making so if you see over here, the document is being passed to the function. So and then it is making a post API call to the cognitive service using the access key that I have provided. So if I see over here, I have defined the access key over here, and then the URL to talk to the API. Yeah, and then like for sorting those sentiments into different queues, right? So we have like based on the if the score is more than 0.8, it will be pushed to the positive queue, feedback queue, and then if it's less than 0.3, it will be pushed to the negative feedback queue. And if it is somewhere, if it doesn't meet any of these above conditions, it will be pushed to the neutral queue. So this is how this code works. So let me show you the actual working function in the Azure portal. So if I go over here, so this is where I have written my code. So it is hosted in Azure Functions. So this is the section where I have defined my bindings for multiple, like all the 4 queues. And this is the actual code that I have written. It takes some time. So yeah, this is the code. So like I can do a dry run for this one just to check if the code is working. So I can just type in here any kind. So okay, I can use this text. So if I go over here, run it. Like if you see over here, right? So it's not getting. So this is the actual. This is a problem with serverless function. So this particular issue is called cold start, right? So whenever we make whenever a function is triggered, it is like a certain service in the backend needs to start up, or our request needs to be connected, be pushed to a certain compute resource, right? So what is happening right now? It's a cold start. So it will take some time for it to start. Let me just rephrase it. So what cold start means is like if the function or a certain compute or serverless service has not been been in a working state, like is not active for a certain amount of time, it will take some time to start up. So that's what the cold start means. Just let me redo this. Okay. Just I think there's some issue. Just let me do a hard refresh. Yeah, so if you see over here, now it's working. So it has spun up. So if you see over here, so this is the particular message that I have provided to the function, and it is giving me the score with 0.95. So it's a positive sentiment. So this is a try run. So actually how it works is, so I have my queues over here. So this is my quantum hack input queue. So if I provide anything like, so if I pass this, and so what it will do is it will automatically trigger the function. Let me see over here. Just let me see the binding section. Okay, it's input. Yeah, that's the correct one. Let me add another one. Yeah, this is the thing with demo. Like when you do a dry run, it works everything works perfectly. But during the actual demo, everything crashes. Okay, just let me look through this. What the actual issue is here. Okay, so again it has disconnected. Okay. Yeah, so actually it's working here, but why is it not? Yeah, so it should, yeah, so both of the text that I have submitted here has been like processed by the function. So it just took some time for it to like pull those text from this queue. So if I go, sorry, if I go back here, so if you see, so like both the text, so like this particular, I'm excited about the event today. So it has been processed, and like I should have another one. Yeah, and just let me refresh this. I think I should get another one as well. So it's taking some time to show those results. Yeah, so here's a happy score for that, and I'm excited. So like both of those got processed like simultaneously. I think it's a parallel process. They were processed parallelly using the two functions. Yeah. So I have multiple scores. So both of them should be in my like positive sentiment queue. Yeah, if I go into the positive sentiment queue, if I like refresh this, like yeah. So if you see over here, I have the detail of those things. Like here's my score, and for this one. So like I can check this for the negative sentiments text as well. So if I go in here and write like, let me just type in a sentiment, yeah, emotions. So if I go here, yeah, it will take certain time just to process this. And just let me add another one as well, just like a simple one. Yeah. Mhm. Yeah, so if you see over here, like it has processed both the messages. So we have SAD over here, and the Kathmandu is the capital city. So like for the first one, I'm getting a negative sentiment score. So it's 0.05, and then for the last one, like Kathmandu is the capital city, so it's a neutral message. So I'm getting a score of 0.5. So for those scores, like all of this data should like the response should be populated in the queues. So like if I go in and look into the queues, yeah, so it's a neutral queue feedback. Yeah, so if you see over here, Kathmandu is the capital city, and then that's for the neutral queues, and for the negative one I have over here. So yeah, for the sad text that I provided, yeah, we have the value over here. So with the sentiment score, yeah, so yeah, so that's all for demo. So if you like want to like go through the what, so these are the references that I have used for like when this demo, and it has the details about like most of the service that I have used in this particular demo. Yeah, that's all for my demo. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Madan, for your presentation. So, any questions, by the way? Because the next session is going to be from our next speaker, Chandan, Bhagat, Gupta. If you have any questions, you can raise your hand as well. So we know that you have some questions. Okay, looks like there's no question. So with this, Chandan, are you there in the call?
Yeah, I am here and I'm ready.
All right, great. So yeah, thanks, Madan, for your presentation. So let's move on to the next one with Chandan. Yeah, over to you, Chandan.
All right. Hi everyone. So I am Chandan Gupta, Bhagat, and I am currently working as a .NET developer and also the DevOps engineer at AgriSync. I think I'm getting some feedback noise, so could you please mute yourself? Okay. So yeah, I'm a .NET developer and DevOps engineer at AgriSync. And today I'll be focusing on the CI/CD using the Azure DevOps. So I think most of you know, if you are new, I think you might not know about the Azure DevOps, or you might have already known about it. So I will go and so you like how to create a pipelines that will actually help you to deploy and manage the versions of your apps. Yeah, so so I'll go ahead and share my screen so that we can start with all right. So is my screen visible?
Yes, it is.
All right. So basically, the basically the topic for today is the CI/CD pipelines, how to manage it. So I'll be focusing on creating a simple web-based application using a .NET Core, or you can have it in any platform and use the CI/CD to deploy automatically to any place actually. So the demo will be more focused on the .NET app that will be in our Azure DevOps, and then it will be it will it will be deployed on the Azure itself. So I have completely now I have complete clean clean resources currently, so I'll be starting from the scratch. So the first thing I will do is I will go ahead and create a new project. So here, yeah, so I will create a new project, and then yeah, so here is our Azure core application, ASP.NET core application. So I will name it something like, let's say, DevOps 2020 virtual. So I will select a web application, a simple web application actually, and then yeah. So I will just run it and see if this application works, if there is any issues. So you can see the web application works fine, right? So the next step, I will be explaining you what is actually the Azure DevOps and how it looks like. So the first part is ready for our web application. So I made this ready, and all right, I think yeah. So on the Azure DevOps is the platform actually where you can do the DevOps stuffs and manage your project, and you can have your project tested out thoroughly in this platform. So whenever you sign in to the Azure DevOps, you get a option at the first to create the organization. So you go ahead and like create the organization, and let's say I will create a new organization called uh, let's say DevOps 2020, right? I think the space is not allowed. Already taken 2020 Nepal. So once this organization is ready, we can have our project set up inside that. So yeah, you can say DevOps 2020 Nepal. You can create the project. You can create a number of projects with public and private mode. Let's have it as a web app project, right? And I will keep this as a private to ensure you that um, um, this can be done in the private mode as well. So I will. So we have our project ready over here in the DevOps, and in the options actually you can see like the overview and the boards, and then repos, and then pipelines, and then the test plan, and then the artifacts, right? So let's start from what is boards. So I guess most of you have been familiar with the project management tool like Jira or something else, right? So I think the most popular is Jira, right? So in here you can actually have that thing. I mean, you can create the work items, you can create the epics, you can create the task as per your need. So this one actually, let's create an epic issue or the task, or if you are the admin, you can manage these things as well. So I will just quickly go through all those items, and then I will focus on the repos and the pipelines. But if you want, you can explore on the board sections, how to manage the project, how to create the tickets, and link them with, you know, the project and the PRs, etc. So let's say if you are creating a task, let's say, all right. So I will create a new task called create a CI/CD pipeline, right? So create a CI/CD pipeline, and I will just assign it to myself. I think I can do that. All right, I'll assign this to myself, right? And then I'll go ahead and save this. So once we have this task, we can actually link that in our PR and other stuffs. So yeah, and well, I think on here we have the work items, we have the boards, right, and we have the backlogs. I mean, if you want to do that in the sprint basis, actually you can create a sprint as well. You can actually define the sprint of the 2 weeks or 1 week, right? So all these settings can be done. So you can have the iteration dates over here and the sprints. You can create the new sprints and so on, and you can specify it properly. So the board section is generally done by the project manager. So let's skip this part, and we will focus on the repos part, right? On the repos part, we have everything to manage the repository. I mean, your codes, right? So it's similar to like GitHub. You use the Git engine in the Azure DevOps also. So it's the similar command that you use. So the difference is only whether you use GitHub or GitLab or Bitbucket or matter. So here, I think you are familiar with most of the things, like you have files, you have the list of commits, you have the pushes and the branches and the tags and the pull requests. Like everything is under one in one room. So uh, yeah, the next is the pipelines, right? So under the pipelines, we have actually the build pipelines and the release pipelines. So generally, what people do is like they do just the one pipeline. That is, most of us like deploy the project, build and deploy the project through one pipelines. But if you want to do that in the standard, so if you work in a team, let's say you have a project manager, you have a lead engineer in top of you, at that part, you can actually set up the pipelines, and you can approve the changes, right? And then you can go ahead and decide whether this release contains the work items that is mentioned in the board or not, right? So I will show this part I will show this part to you later on. So and the next thing, what we have in the Azure DevOps is the test plans. So generally this is done by the QA, and we can perform the load testing, etc. You can have set up the test plans, and you can have progress reports and the load test, etc. And the last one is the artifacts. The artifacts contains actually it is the place where you actually have the private Nougat package of your own. Let's say if you're working on the .NET package, you have Nougat environment. So you have actually every feed. Let's say we can also connect. We can create the feed. We can connect the feed that is for the Nougat and for the npm and the Maven, the Python and other packages as well. So you can actually have your own private repository for these artifacts. So how do you connect them? You can go ahead and explore it. So I'm not focusing on this part currently. So my main focus will be on the repository and the pipelines. So yeah, and once we have the project over here, we get to know the repository. And under the repository, if you go to the top portion, and you can see like the multiple repository over here, where you can create new repository as well. So you can actually host multiple projects inside inside this project. So at this point, I will just use this and is that yeah. All right, we have this project now. What I'll do is I will connect it using Teams. We have the Teams Explorer over here, and you can actually connect, manage the connections over here, and you can. I think I need to do it from the command line. So let's do it from the command line. So. So here's our project, and then we can have this git bash, and under this, if you are able to see this or not, let me know. So I will start with a few git commands. So I will initialize this repository. So the initialization code is git init. I think most of you know this. And then I will git git remote add origin, and then I will use this SSH key. So we have this thing ready, and the next step is to commit the code. I'll just commit it. So I think I'm missing a git ignore file, right? So just a second. I will get a git ignore file that will be. All right, here's the git ignore file. So at this point, if we can see this git ignore file, we can see it like here we are, right? I think you are familiar with this. And what's that? All right. So, yep. Here we are. So I will add this and commit it. Git commit and that will be the initial commit. And then the next step will be git push origin and then master, right? So just let me see. Git not Gatsby DevOps 2024. I think this is existing one. Oh, sorry. Yeah, I have the authentication for private key issues over here. So I'll just quickly add this. Right. So if you want to know where is your this private key, this private key is actually inside the C drive, and then you go to your user, and then the SSH, and you open this file and get that the public SSH key if you want to actually use that. So I have chosen the SSH key over the HTTPS because it helps me not to use the username and password. So yeah, that's That's the plan for me. So well, we have this, and then the next step, I will push after. Yeah, it's working. And when you go to the repository, you can see the code is posted, right? So we have everything ready over here. And the next step will be like I will be creating the pipelines over here. So once the code is ready, we are ready to have this uh, on the pipelines. So before that, before creating the pipeline, we need to make sure we have our Azure environment ready, right? We have our deployment place ready, like the place where we can deploy the file and I mean your web project. So I will just create a resources over here, and well, the web app here. Mm, So it is DevOps 2020. Uh, yeah, and then I will see DevOps 2020 Nepal 202. All right. Okay. So we have DevOps 2020 Nepal. So the runtime stack is our .NET Core 3.1 that we are using in the project. So if you want to know what stack are you using, so it is uh, you can see on the properties of this. It is not sure why it is taking late. Yeah, you can see the target framework is the .NET Core 3.1. So I choose to use the .NET 3.1 over here, and then after this, we can use the SKU size, the plan for the app service. So I'll just use the free one because that doesn't cost me, right? So this one is the free one. So it has like 1 GB memory and 60 minutes every day for the compute. So it's better for me to use this shared infrastructure that will not cost me anything. So yeah, after this, you can actually create your own specification. Uh, so let's create this. I think it's validated. If there is any issues or any errors, you can have the notification over here. So currently our all the settings are validated, all the parameters are validated. So yeah, we are ready to create. So meanwhile, the app is being created. We will go ahead and create the pipelines over here. So I will do one thing. I will create a pipelines. Uh, so under this pipeline, you can actually choose your code repository. It doesn't matter where your code repository is. It can be in the Azure repos. It can be on the Bitbucket cloud. It can be on the GitHub or other Git system. So currently, our code is in the Azure repos. So I will choose this one, right? And then I choose the project, and then our project is based on the ASP.NET. ASP.NET, so I will choose this one, and it will actually create a template over here. So yeah, we have the template over here. So at the first stage, the template says template has the trigger mode. So whenever the code is posted on the master branch, so anything happens in the master branch, it will initiate this pipelines, and it will initiate this one. So the VM image that we are using to build this project on the cloud is the Windows. That is the latest version of the Windows, and we have uh, the variables for the project and the build configurations. We choose the release. So these are the variables that are used in the different parts. So as you can see, the build configuration over here. You can see the build configuration is it's chosen over here, and the next thing is like well, the Nougat tool installer. So we have one task. So under this steps, there is defined a list of the task, right? List of the task. So we have like currently 4 tasks over here, where the first task is to set up the Nougat tool installer, and the second task is used to restore all the Nougat packages in the .NET project. And then third task is like once the NuGet packages are ready, everything is ready, we use the build command, right? So we are using the build command over here also, and lastly the test project, right? So under this test project, we don't need it currently, so I will just remove this and add a new step over here. So the step would be so if you can see. Um, uh, the step would be to publish the artifacts, right? So publish artifacts, yeah, publish the build artifacts. So once the build is ready, we will be actually able to publish the artifacts to our Azure pipelines. The variables is the path to publish one, where where the build files are kept, right? And then this one is named as a drop, or you can name it anything. Let's say we use this as final build master. So I will keep this, and I will publish this artifacts to our uh, uh, Azure pipelines. So once we are ready with this, the task is added over here, and then we can save and run, or simply just save it, right? So this is committed directly to the master branch. So I will just save it, and we can run this pipeline later, or we can just run it. So yeah. Meanwhile, this pipelines is being built, the build pipeline is ready, we'll go ahead with the release pipeline. So under the release pipeline, there is a bunch of things like we need to create a new release pipeline for the artifact that is published. So if you have like multiple build pipelines, you can manage it accordingly. So sometimes in a big project, what happens is like uh, there are different dependencies on the different things. So if the 2 different projects are built and um, uh, uh, requires each of the dependency, we can easily manage it through the release pipelines. So under this new release pipelines, you can have a bunch of like templates, or you can just go ahead and start with the empty job. So it doesn't matter like what project are using, you can go and explore it. So we have um, uh, uh, pipelines, actually a template to deploy a function app, right? You can see over here. So you have options, you have numerous options over here. So our main demo is on the Azure App Service deployment. So I will just go ahead and apply this. And yeah, once this is ready, let's say this one is the Dev, the stage name I've given it as a Dev. And then let's see, yeah, under the job, I need to add some of the settings that actually requires the Azure subscriptions. So I will choose the Azure subscription, right? I have this one, Azure subscription. And after choosing this, I will just authorize it. And so meanwhile, it is authorized. Yeah, it's authorized. And we are using the app type of the web app on the Windows platform, right? We can have like the different options over here. So we have web app on the Linux, web app on the containers, and function apps, mobile app, whatever. So we are using this web app on the Windows. So under this, we can actually find out our this project that we recently created, right, in our Azure account. So this one is like the DevOps 2020 Nepal, and then after this is done, I think we are ready. I will just save it under the root folder. Uh, yep. And one more thing, like whenever artifacts is published to our build pipeline, so you can actually choose here the build pipelines, right? So the build pipelines is the web app. If you are confused, you can see that name over here. See the web app. I think yeah, this one is this one is completed. So yeah. So under the web app, if I say this option is actually the continuous deployment trigger, which means that whenever a new build is created the build pipelines, uh, in the build pipelines, it actually initiates our release pipeline, right? So to enable this, we just need to enable this continuous deployment trigger. We will enable this and we will save this, right? And what happens is uh, uh, if you have a big a development team and you have a manager over there, so you can actually have the pre-deployment approvals, uh, pre-deployment approvals. So that will be the approvers of you can actually add the users that can approve the changes, right? And I will just disable this so it won't take much time. So yeah, once things are ready, we have everything ready, and let's see. Mm, we have few changes to be made. So let's say if on the project currently in the local PC, like I'm typing this one, welcome over here, and then I remove these and then add welcome to our um, quantum uh, hack event, right? So whenever a changes is made, we will just uh, commit it, and then we will see if that things works, right? Git uh, change in main file, and I will git push origin master. So yeah, sorry, git to origin master. Since there was like a new content yeah, you can see the Azure pipelines.yml that is created on the Azure DevOps needs to be merged. So I will git push origin and then master. Right. So as you can see, we have committed this branch, and meanwhile, you can see uh, the process to build and release is initiated. So once this build is completed, it will go to the release section and then it will release it. So let's see how our currently the current website looks like. So here we are. we have this as a default website, right? And if you want to see the logs over here, you can just go ahead and just click on this job so you can see what's actually happening in the background. So currently our step is stuck into the Nougat command, and then now the BS build is initiated. Let me know if you have any questions in the meanwhile so that we can use our time. So yeah, the build pipeline is completed. Now it will automatically move to new release pipeline. So you can see a new release is created. So if you want to see what is happening in the happening in this, you can go and see the logs as well.
Uh, Chandan, we have 6 minutes remaining.
Yeah, I think that will do. I'm just done with this.
Okay.
So you can see all those files are being deployed in our this app that we created in the Azure. So yeah, everything is ready. Now let's see. Let's reload this and see if the code is deployed or not. See, uh, and in the meanwhile, actually you can like have this use this to create the variables. Let's say if you have the connection strings or something, some important information that let's say the username and password, those critical information, you can keep this as a variables. You can actually use this. You can create a new variable, right? And let's say if you edit this pipeline, you can see the variables and then retention policies. So I will talk about this retention policies, right? So currently our, let's say change is welcome to our quantum hack event. Let's say I made a new change and then added over here version 1, right? And the next step would be if I commit this, uh, version 2, right? And then so after pushing this, it will automatically reinitiate those things. I mean, the pipelines will be auto initiated. See, you can see. And if you want to see the history, you can see this, the build history. And the thing which I'm going to show is like how do you manage the version. So let's say in the new build there is like few of the bugs that is the critical one, and you want to revert it back to the original state. So in that case you can actually use the history of the releases to manage those things. Let's say what happens in the next step. So in the meantime, if you have any questions, just let me know. We have like 3 minutes now. The thing which I was about to show you was, let's say if we edit this pipeline, we can actually have the retention policies and then the options and then the history of what's being changed over here. So let's say if you have multiple artifacts, you can actually add it and you can actually schedule it also. So let's say sometimes what happens is like every Wednesday you need to or every any day at the at some point at some date or time, actually you need to schedule this pipelines. So you can actually schedule this and you can have this on which day actually you want to uh, initiate and deploy the things. So yeah, I think this one is completed and we have the second release in progress. Let's see. And also one more thing I would just like to add, like if you have like the multiple stages or the multiple environments, you can actually add it the new stage and you can have it over here, right? And you can let's say if we have the similar type of the environment, you can add it as the stage 2 and add the new connections over there, uh, and you can manage it accordingly. So here, you can actually add a new stage after this also. So whenever the deployments happen on the day, we can go to the staging environment or some other environment, right? So you can manage the process accordingly. So currently, let's skip this. We don't want to save this one. I think our content is released. So you can see uh, yeah, you can see the version 1 over here, right? You can see the changes. But what happens, what if you want to revert that release? So you can actually go to that pipelines to your release and select it. So you have the release 1 and release 2. Currently this one is active one, as you can see it is highlighted, right? So you can, if you want to revert back to here, you can just go to this release and deploy it. So once you do the deployment, it will again start the deployment process, and you can actually revert it back to the original state. So here you have like numerous options to do over here. You can manage your pipelines accordingly. You can do everything you want. Uh, it's not just about the web service. You can actually have that deployment to be done in the Kubernetes environment if you want to, right? And well, I think the next topic is about the Kubernetes, right? And you can actually set up the pipelines for that. And it's not just only the for the Azure environment. You can do that in any environment. So our revert is completed, and then you can see it went back to the original state. So the new content that was released is reverted back to the original state. So yeah, I'm done for the demo. If there are any questions, just let me know. Pradeep sir.
All right, thank you so much, Chandan, for your nice presentation. If there's no question, is there any question? Let's check the chat section if there's any question first. Well, there's a question called, is the recorded video available to us? Yes, we are recording this session, so we'll make it available in our YouTube channel. We'll share the link to the YouTube channel here, right on the chat box, Sangam. So with this, our last but not the least, our special guest from Microsoft, uh, Sajitharan Sinathurai. Are you there, Saji, on the call?
Hi, Pradeep. Hi, everyone. Yes, I'm in the call.
Oh, great. Yeah, thanks. Oh, yeah, we can see you. That's cool.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So I think I need not introduce you because you would be doing by yourself.
Yep.
So, yeah. Thanks for sharing your screen. So I'll hand over the session to you, Saji.
All right. Thanks, Pradeep. I think good evening, good afternoon, and good morning to everyone based on wherever you are. And thank you for joining us today, right? I am really excited to be part of this Quantum Hack initiative and especially on this meetup before we kickstart the actual hackathon. So before we kickstart the session, let me introduce myself. Last year I was in Nepal. I enjoyed every moment there, right? This time I'm connecting virtually. Hopefully you will like this session as well. I'm Sajidran, working as a cloud solution architect at Microsoft from the One Commercial Partner technical team. I'm passionate on the .NET and open source technologies. So I like to mentor the next generation of developers during my free time, and I contribute to a lot of open source repositories, which you can find on my online repositories. In this session, I'm really excited to take you through Azure Kubernetes Service and talk a little more about how you can containerize microservices and deploy to Azure. With Kubernetes on Azure and its benefits for ISVs or developers like most of you. Feel free to use the IM window. As you can see, you can ask any questions related to Azure. Even it could be on open source or any of the technologies that you have in mind. I hope this session will be useful to you guys based on the things that I share. Let's get started before we kickstart the quantum hack. All right, the agenda for this session would be, I would be kicking off this session with introduction on the topic, basically around cloud native and what is containerization, and then we will see what are the container offerings available on Azure, and let's discuss which service to use on which scenario, and then in general how Kubernetes is being adopted in the open source world and how you can deploy multi-containerized application on AKS with the demos that I'm going to do today. It's going to be an extended session. Probably it might take more than an hour, but you need to have patience to go through all the content that I'm going to share. Basically, I will cover two demos to demonstrate how you can simply deploy a multi-containerized application on AKS, and then how you can debug this multi-containerized environment using Azure Dev Spaces, which is not provided by any of the cloud provider out there to debug your application in production so easily. I want to kickstart this session by mentioning the things which you have learned earlier, right? I know this meetup is all about cloud native. In general, whenever application is termed as a cloud native, it has to be built in such a way that it can operate on any cloud. It could be private, it could be public, or it could be a combination of private and public using the methodologies that is very specific to cloud. Cloud native computing takes advantage of different things, right? If you talk about modernization, you are talking about different things, including PaaS services, including multi-cloud, including microservice architecture, and then agile methodologies. And then in the last session, he spoke about CI/CD pipelines, which talks about DevOps process. So all these things are related to cloud native when you're building applications to cloud native. The term cloud native really means what a specific approach which was used in building the application. First, it helps you to manage the infrastructure more efficiently. Second, the cloud native apps are fault tolerant. So if something happens to your application, you should be in a position to make it active in the next second. Third, the cost of the cloud natives should be very low, right? with being applications move to cloud and the customers are looking forward to the digital transformation in the application or in their environments, you need to be efficiently manage your cloud environment with low cost. So cloud native applications should be able to handle that. And fourth thing, it should be automated and scaling should be easily available. When you talk about your application handling millions of users across the world, it should be in a position to scale your application in a quick manner. Specifically, cloud native applications are built around several small self-containerized application, which is referred to as microservices that are deployed on cloud using containers. So containers are the solution to the problem of how to get the application to run reliably when moving from one environment to another environment. This could be from a developers' laptops to a production environment where you deploy multi-containers application. A container consists of runtime environment. It could be an application plus all the dependencies that you need to have for your application. It could be libraries, it could be other binaries and configuration files that you need to run your application that are bundled into a one package. So if you are new to containers or cloud native, I hope I gave a brief introduction about containers and cloud native. In order to describe about what are the benefits it provides, right? Containers has made it easy for developers like me or yourself to build a large-scale application. Anyone can package an application from their machine and then deploy to any environment starting from public or private cloud, or it could be even bare metals. As we rightly said, it denotes the term build once and then deploy anywhere you want. Being a lightweight or containers are fast, they can also consume few resources. One can easily run containers in few seconds. It also can give a flexibility for developers to break down the application into small functionalities so that you can deploy the function quickly without spending much time on the whole application, or you don't have to bring down the entire application to deploy the new features. One can easily scale and update the components independent of the other services. So this is the real huge benefit that I see among developers, so that you can focus on your code rather than the downtime or the deployment models that you take. If you are new to Azure, these are the container offerings available on Azure. Probably you might have heard some which was shared in the previous session, but you might have heard of Service Fabric, which was introduced by Microsoft. And then AKS is the managed version of Kubernetes, which was introduced by Google. And then we have App Service in the form of web app for containers. And finally, we have the OpenShift for open source containerist methodologies, or even if you want to deploy your solution on-prem. So if you ask me which one to choose on which way, this is the table that you need to look for. So this depends on different factors, on the management and support, based on the orchestration, based on the workloads, based on the OS that you want to deploy, and the learning curve as well. So if you see on AKS is from the Microsoft side, AKS is preferred the most comfortable way to deploy your multi-containers environments to the cloud, or even it could be on, if you want to deploy an on-prem, you can do that. So I don't have to go through in detail. You can go through this table, and also I have attached this link. You can decide which one to choose on which way. But if you have any specific question, I would like to explore them at the end of the session. I would like to go in deep level in this particular scenarios that I want to talk about, because most of the developers or organizations or ISVs are still confused on these scenarios or on which services to choose, right? The first one is a scenario where your company is developing, has a development team who is very capable of having a knowledge on containers, Dockers, on having an experience on running Kubernetes on premise. Then you need to go to on cloud using AKS as the option, because it provides a way to deploy to use the capabilities that the development team that already have, so that you can easily shift from on-prem environment to cloud. It could be on AKS, or it could be on EKS, or it could be on GKE as well. But in this session, I'm going to cover on AKS in a more deep dive manner so that you can leverage AKS features in the quantum hack or in any of the developer environment that in your organization. And the scenario 2 is if your company is very new to AK or Kubernetes, but you have experience on Docker, but if you don't have any experience on any of the orchestration, it could be AKS or it could be on Swarm, Docker Swarm, it could be on Rancher. Then you need to choose the web app for container if you want to deploy your web application to the cloud. And the scenario 3, a customer who's the development environment development team is more familiar on the Windows OS or containers, then you can go for Service Fabric, because Service Fabric is more suitable for Windows Windows workloads, and it's most of the Azure services are running on top of Service Fabric. If you're building microservice applications, you can go for that. And the scenario 4 is basically for open source developers or even on-prem solutions that are deployed in a containers way. Then you can choose OpenShift on Azure. This is kind of overall introduction that I wanted to give. If you're confused on which services or which scenarios you want to accommodate in your production environment. All right, I talked about containers, I talked about cloud native. At a certain point, we need to realize that having containers would not work, right? So you might have heard about Dockers. So having Docker would not be capable to orchestrate your solution. So if you want to manage your whole environment, then you need to go for an orchestrator, right? You need to have someone to orchestrate the workload. Say in this particular session, Pradeep and the cloud Nepal professionals, right? I'm not sure if the name is correct, but they are orchestrating this particular event, Quantum Hack, and also this particular meetup to educate the other fellow developers to learn about different technologies. Assume if one of the speaker, assume myself, would not be able to make it, then he has to get another speaker to deliver that session. Assume the same environment, you have multiple workloads running in your production environment. One of the container goes down. What would happen next? Someone has to spin up the new container and makes it available for your end users to access the application in production. That is what orchestration is all about. It's about managing your environment. It's about providing the package. It's about orchestrating different things. It's about making the environment available for end users without having any downtime. So with Kubernetes, there are different ways to handle it. I will come to that later stage. But if you talk about orchestration, there are different orchestrators available in public. You can heard about Docker Swarm. It's a Docker Inc. solution. It has been re-architected recently based on SwarmKit, and it has been used widely by most of the open source developers. And then we have Apache Mesos, and then we have Nomad, and then we have Rancher, which is hugely used by open source developers. And then we have Kubernetes, right, which is in short form you can call about K8s. So these are the features that orchestrators provides. It talks about scheduling, it talks about naming and discovery, and it talks about scaling, auto scaling. You don't have to manually deploy your containers. You can forget about the environment. If you have the CI/CD pipeline, then you can spin up a new pod that would cater the existing audience without any downtime. So you can set up the CI/CD pipeline easily using the CI/CD DevOps tools that are already available, using Jenkins, using Azure DevOps. If you're using EKS, you can use any of those cloud pipelines that is available, right? So you need an orchestrator. At the end of the day, we need something to help us with the orchestration. That is what we are going to cover today. So this is a marketing term, but I wanted to cover as well. From the industry perspective, Gartner claimed that by 2020, more than 50% of the enterprise application will be running mission critical applications in production using Kubernetes. So it is also impressive to see that greater companies like ISVs are leading the adoption. Containers are the next phase of modernized application because there is tremendous growth the companies are adopting to it, right? which I wanted to highlight. When you see from a customer's perspective, from the ISV's perspective, Kubernetes really emerged as the leading orchestrators across the industries, which other orchestrators which I mentioned in the earlier slide. There are many reasons for this. It offers portability across multiple on-prem environment and also on cloud. It is also extensible because the ecosystem, including the tooling, whatever the developers choose, right? You can talk about um, CI/CD pipelines. You can talk about providing the authorization. You can talk about extending the services which are provided by the cloud service providers. So all sort of cloud native operations, such as how do you aggregate, how do you distribute, and whatever the operations that you need to do for the distributed application, that can be done with Kubernetes. So we talk about self-sealing, we talk about automatic scaling, we talk about automatic pin backing, and then orchestration. All this can be provided with Kubernetes service. And when you talk about AKS, it's a managed environment provided by Azure to manage your Kubernetes environment, right? So when Kubernetes was introduced, it was a non-managed service. So most of the users have the difficulties in managing the environment. So when you deploy a solution, what would happen at the backend is that it calls the master infrastructure API server, which has the schedulers and then controllers with the etcd operator, which access the data store for Kubernetes. So customers had to manage all these manually. This is how Kubernetes workloads in most of the customer environment would look like. This involves a lot of work to maintain and also to master the infrastructure. You need to have a large team to make sure that things are not going wrong. Kubernetes on Azure is taking all these hard parts and turn them into a managed service. So you don't have to worry about all these things that I mentioned. Azure Kubernetes Service does automated upgrades, patches, and then it provides high availability for application. It gives flexibility to easily secure scaling through the portal, and then you can use any of the cloud IDEs as well as PowerShell commands. When it comes to self-healing, that can be done through pools, which is called the node pools, and it provides through monitoring and also extended capabilities such as application insights in order to monitor your environment. All this comes with free, so that you don't have to worry about your environment anymore. So if you look at what are the features in general, AKS is simplifying the deployment, management, and operations for Kubernetes. Lots of different things and offerings is available, so you don't have to worry about how things scales. Setting up CI/CD pipeline, which we have seen in the previous sessions, which can be simply set it up for developers to have a continuous deployment. And with great security integrations, which is not provided by any of the other cloud providers such as Azure AD, and then you get the ecosystem of open source tooling around Kubernetes, which I will be covering in the few slides. So if you are asking me how to start with Kubernetes, these are some of the easy ways to start if you're a developer. So you can, do you have any questions?
Yeah, looks like Aniruddha has some question. He's
I would
raising
be
his.
taking up the question at the end of the session so that
Okay.
we won't be diverting from the content that we are going to share. Right. So you can have this questions at the end so that I will take up those questions at the end. So if you ask me how developers can simply spin up a Kubernetes cluster, is that you can spin up a cluster using the portal itself if you are new to Kubernetes. But if you are a developer who has hands-on experience, you can start using the CLI commands and then PowerShell. So these are some of the basic commands to create your Kubernetes cluster. And if you want to upgrade thousands of clusters, thousands of nodes, in your Kubernetes cluster, you can simply upgrade using the upgrade command. If you want to upgrade with simply passing the parameters and then call the upgrade cluster so that you can upgrade your environment without having any downtime. A lot of work involved in scaling, so you have to make sure that you are not interrupting the users who are actively using your environment. So all that can be used, all that can be done with this particular command called AKS scale. So this is for developers, and for IT pros who don't have the hands-on experience, they can use the Kubernetes on portal so that you can use the GUI version to scale it up and do things like that. And second thing is about when it comes to containerized development with traditional model, you are basically doing everything on your own, how to build a Docker file and how to build a Helm chart and then building the image, right? So this can be automated using the draft command. So Azure Kubernetes Services is offering a way to scaffold things which would accelerate the containers development so that you can automate using these particular commands to deploy your workloads to Kubernetes. Next thing I wanted to point out here is that a lot of developers are deploying microservices in their environment, right? Using microservice environment will have some ports which needs to be exposed to public internet by using HTTP application routing, which is just a toggle feature in AKS so that you can switch it on and then make your application accessible to any developers using the HTTP routing. And then when you talk about DNS, a lot of manual work can be eliminated using the ingress controller. And then you can, if you want to have any of the external routing, you can use that as well. So these are some of the features that I wanted to highlight. Actually, I will show in the demo on how to scale easily using the AKS portal as well as using the commands. One of the important thing that I wanted to cover is the Azure Container Registry, which I will be showing in the demo. And things like monitoring and things like scaling with the extended SQL workloads. So if you talk about SQL, if you talk about Cosmos DB, you can easily plug in using the integrated authentication provided with Azure Kubernetes Service so that you don't have to manage those workloads manually. Next, for the open source developer, which would be exciting, I wanted to cover this slide as well. One of the big reasons for the adoption of AKS is the reason because the whole ecosystem of open source developers, toolings, and the APIs, the things like Helm and then draft with the open source community, right? So if you see Prometheus, which is widely used by the AKS community to have the monitoring enabled for your environment, and things like Twistlock, Aqua are doing great work on the container security and the image scanning to scan your images being affected from any of the secure vulnerabilities that you want to avoid on your environment. All those tools in the ecosystem of tooling and the API support is something that you can take advantage. I don't want to cover in detail on all those toolings, but I would recommend you to go and contribute to this open source tooling, which are available for developers to contribute, and also you can extend the capabilities with your AKS. And the next thing I want to cover is the scenario, which I will be covering in the demo. So if you want to secure your environment using any of the built-in services provided with AKS, you can have a view about Azure Active Directory, which was covered in the initial session by Pradeep. So you will have an integrated authentication with Azure AD provided, so you don't have to worry about the security for the RBAC roles that is given for the administrators or developers. And the second is the Key Vault. As a developer, you need to very much focused on the security that you need to have on the code, right? So you can have your environment variables stored on the Key Vault and whatever the access that you need to provide for your SQL or any of the database that you can store in the Key Vault. And then you can create the VNet policy that is already available with the VNet integrations that is provided with the Azure. And then every pods on AKS will have a compliance checklist which is provided on Azure, such as SOC, HIPAA, PCI compliance, which is not provided on any other cloud. So there are 92 standards that is available. So these are some of the advantages. I think I'm running out of time, but I wanted to cover this in detail so that you will have a deep understanding on what are the services, what are the capabilities provided on Azure. When it comes to scaling, there are different technical solutions with the product available. AKS have the built-in auto scaling at few levels. The Kubernetes autoscaler will allow you to scale your containers workloads. So you can do the scaling in 3 ways. One is called the horizontal port scaling. So if you have containers as pods, then you can you can scale those pods using the horizontal port scaling, and then at the cluster level, at the overall level. So you will scale the infrastructure. It can be done through the node pools, right? So you will increase the node pools in order to cater your requests. And the third is the very effective way, which is called the AKS with Azure Container Instances. Say if you are running Azure Functions as a compute mode of costing. So it's charged per billing, so that you have to pay for what you use, right? So you will have some of the functions which would run at a certain point of time. So you can scale that kind of application as an extended version of Kubernetes, so that it will be charged on what you use, so that you can use virtual kubelets, something called, so that you can extend those workloads based on that, based on the request that users are requesting. So there are three ways. The first is horizontal port scaling. Second is cluster auto scaling. Third one is the AKS with ACI, Azure Container Instances, which is called the burst scenarios. So if you have some of the workloads which are spiking at certain levels, you can integrate with virtual kubelets and then scale those workloads. This is how the end-to-end experience is going to look like. I'm going to cover a demo on this as well. So you will have a cluster on AKS, and then you will have a developers who are pushing their code through the container registry. And then whenever they commit some code, it will go to the CI/CD pipeline. It will build a container image, which will sit on Azure Container Registry. And then you will have your workloads. It could be microservices. It could be front-end application running as a pods on the AKS environment. And then you will connect to Azure Monitor in order to monitor the workloads. And then if you want to connect to any of the SQL DB or any of the database such as Cosmos DB, you can extend those using the AKS as well. So this is kind of the end-to-end experience would look like on AKS. And the next thing I'm going to cover is the microservices. So microservices in general, we have seen the first one is around lifting and shifting the workloads, right? Can you hear me? I think there is a network drop. Just confirm if you can hear me. Pradeep?
Yes, Sazi, I can hear you.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right. So these are some of the scenarios that you can consider moving your workloads to Azure Kubernetes Service. The first one is lift and shift of your containers. So if you are running, if your customers are running, or if your environment is running on-prem, and if you want to take it to the cloud, if your environment is, if your solution is running on VMs, and if you want to take it to the cloud, the first scenarios around that, right? In general, we have seen the first one is around lifting and shifting the workloads to containers, and this is really around cost saving scenario. So you might be seeing if you're deploying on VM, there would be high costing because each of the VM would cost much for each of the scenarios that you're running. So you can shift those workloads using pods so that you don't have to pay for each of the VMs. The next one is around the microservice, deploying microservices. When developers want to have control on what they want to build, Kubernetes is well suited to support each of the scenarios, and then you can focus on the particular application that you want to deploy, how distributed teams can work on software independently, so that agility, it's about faster development deployment, right? And the third one is about machine learning. So if you are building models in IoT devices, these days you can build models and then deploy in IoT edge, and then run your containers within the devices as well. So if you are interested in, there is Azure IoT Edge Toolkit, which is available, which is around $329. You can deploy your machine learning workloads, and then you can monitor what are the things happening around in your environment, even offline. So you can build cool things around this particular scenarios, which I talked about. And the third one is about around IoT. So IoT is one of the modern revolving, a scenario that you might need to have AKS playing in, so that you can deploy your containers in the IoT devices and then monitor in your AKS environment. So these are the four scenarios, and particularly I wanted to cover the microservice architecture today. So microservice is a very famous topic among developers, right? And this is the way, the modernized way world is going towards, right? Particularly if you have a look at some of the huge applications like Uber, like Facebook. These applications were nowhere in the before 10 years, right? So if you consider how they have evolved in the recent years, is that using the microservice deployment, how fast you can deploy quick things to the world in order to consume, right? Moving microservices architecture allows individual deployment, structure your team on individual code bases. Microservices deployment work across different pool servers. So if you have a monolithic application, you can split each of those modules as a microservice scenario, microservice containerist way, and then deploy using AKSs. The term microservice emphasizes the fact that applications should be composed of small enough to truly implement a single role, and it should do a single role. It could be getting the product details, or it could be doing a particular transaction. Each has a well-defined contracts, or you can call it as API contracts for the other microservices to communicate and then share the data with it. Microservices must also share a version to update independently each other, right? One of the demo session in the previous session, right? You can see a versioning, how you can do each version irrespective of affecting the previous version. So this will have loose coupling. So it's a key to support rapid and reliable revolution of an application. So if you take a monolithic application, it contains domain specific functionality, and it is very hard to break those functionalities into layers, right? This can be solved using microservices. So a microservice application separates the functionality. It could be you can have separate databases, but it depends on the scenario that you want to build. These are kind of the advantages that I wanted to cover if you are new to microservices. And finally, how Microsoft is contributing to the open source developers. If you are new to Microsoft and if you hate Microsoft, you might need to know this fact. When it comes to Azure, Linux is growing at a rate of 3 times than Windows. So if you see workloads deployed on AKS, most of the workloads are deployed on Linux environment. So you can see the growth or the support given by Microsoft to have the open source mindset. Microsoft contributions in terms of open source has been tremendous in the last 5 years in terms of how Kubernetes has evolved in the last 5 years and how developer tooling has evolved around Kubernetes. If you have watched this build, right, MS build this year, there was a topic around Dapper, there was topic around KEDA. So these are two kind of evolving frameworks which enables any kind of developers to deploy their whatever their workloads using AKS, irrespective of the framework that they have underlying environment. So these are some of the open source frameworks that Microsoft is supporting. I would request you to go and have a look at Dapper and KEDA, which is evolving in the recent months in a huge way. And finally, what the thing is around Azure Container Registry. So if you have heard of Docker registry, which is available in public for developers to build your container images to public, and then that can be consumed by any developers. Similarly, we have a service on Azure, which is called the Azure Container Registry, so that you can deploy your application in a containers way using Container Registry, and that can be deployed on AKS. So it has so many advantages than on Docker Container Registry. It has a tight integration when it comes to security. It has integrations with Azure AD. It has integrations with Azure Monitor, so that you can monitor who are the people who have control, and you can lock the images and do things like that. And then finally, Azure Container Instances, as I talk about a scenario where you want to scale your environment based on request, right? So that's where Azure Container comes into place. Azure Container Instances comes into place, which is a serverless way of deploying your containerized application, which you can have a way to deploy your application faster, and then you don't have to worry about management. And then finally, the important factor, it is price per second based on the consumption, whatever the services that you are using, so that you don't have to pay for the underlying VM. And then you can deploy images from your Docker Hub, and then you can deploy images from the Container Registry and do several things. This is final thing which was introduced in the build this year. KEDA is an open source framework which allows fine-grained auto-scaling for event-driven Kubernetes workloads. If you have workloads on Azure Functions, you can extend Kubernetes environment to serve those workloads running as a function. So virtual kubelets allow your workloads to scale automatically by providing the same API as a kubelet, so that each cloud provider has their own implementation of virtual kubelets. So you can we have Azure Container Instances on Azure, and there are different virtual kubelets available on AWS and GCP as well. This is one of the interesting thing which I'm passionate about, so I wanted to share as well. You can go and explore this particular thing. Finally, if you ask me what are the advantages that AKS provides ahead of AWS, EKS or GCP, is the dev spaces is one of the key thing that we have. So I know most of you are a fan of Visual Studio Code, so you can use this extension dev spaces in order to deploy the Kubernetes environment without creating the environment in your local machine, so that you will have an environment created for you, so that you can debug whatever the errors that is happening in the Kubernetes environment that is running in production, and then you can see the same environment created in local using the dev spaces, and then you can fix your issues and then deploy the new pods or new workloads as a containerized way, so that users won't have any idea on what's happening there. Right? This is one of the key things that I wanted to share. Let me jump into the demo. Do you want to see a demo? Probably I might have taken more time, but if you want to see a demo, probably I can share that as well. What about you guys? You can put a yes or no. I think I have 20 more.
Sure, Shazi.
Okay, I will share a demo as well. Probably if you are new to Azure, I would recommend you to start this demo with me, so that it's very simple demo. I have two demos for today, right? One is for the newcomers, and the other one is for the experienced developers who are deploying multi-containers deployment on Azure. In order to explain the architecture, let me show the demo that I'm going to show. So I have a Node.js API. Node.js, you can call it a web service. And then I'm going to containerize this Node.js API using Docker. So I am going to package this application. So this is a simple get API, right? I'm going to call a get API called get mentors. So it's going to return the list of mentors for this quantum hack. So I am going to containerize this particular Node.js web API with all these dependencies using Docker. And then I'm going to push this to ACR, which is the Azure Container Registry. So it's going to use a single pod in the AKS. So I'm going to have a single pod, and there is going to be a master node, which is managed by Azure. So probably my handwriting is not good, but you can call it as a master node. And then we have a worker node, which is called the worker node node pools on Azure. You can have access on Azure portal, and then you will see the node pools. So pods are the containerized applications. You can have n number of pods within worker nodes. So in this case, I'm going to have one pod, right, which is the node web service that I have created, and I have an image which is pushed to ACR. I'm going to take that image and then deploy to node, deploy to a pod. So which is going to be orchestrated by AKS. So this is a simple demo that I have for today. Probably I will show it from the scratch on how to build that. This particular demo is available on my GitHub as well. So if you are new, you can go and start right now in order to deploy this particular applications, which is called Sajidran/QH Nepal AKS, which I will be sharing the link at the end of the session. The first step, what I need to do is you need to create the Node.js application, right? So in this case, you can see I am using a Express.js as the web API, and then I'm going to deploy on port 9002. And then it is a simple web API called get QH mentors. I am going to return this mentors who are mentoring this particular QH app. I forgot to include myself. So I will add Saji as the mentor as well. So right, I'm going to deploy this application to AKS. So I need to first, log into my Azure account. So the first step is to log into my Azure account. I already have a free trial, which is provided by Microsoft. So if you have a free trial, you can join doing the demo with me as well. So I need to set my account using this account set option. But if you are doing it on the portal, I will be showing at the end. The first thing that you need to create is the resource group. So if you ask me what is resource group, you might have seen in the previous session, he was creating a web application to deploy the application, right? So resource group can be a combination of services that are available in Azure so that you can manage them easily. So in this case, I'm going to create a resource group called QH Nepal, which is deployed on Southeast Asian region. I'm going to erase this. This is the mistake that we have in copy paste, right? So as you can see, I am going to create my resource group on this particular Southeast Asian region. It might take a few seconds. Yes, as you can see, it has created the resource group. The next step, what we need to create is the container registry. So as I have showed in the particular diagram, we are going to create the first step is done. The second step is to create the ACR as a container registry. So you can use the Docker container registry as well, but since I'm a Microsoft employee, I need to demonstrate the ACR, right? But if you want to try with container registry, you can use a Docker container registry as well. So I'm going to create this container registry in the same location as where I have deployed the resource group. Okay, we need to delete this one. So it is going to create this particular container registry at the backend. As you can see, it has created the container registry within few seconds. And the next step, what I'm going to do is, I think I have created the resource group again. If I'm correct, yes, that's a mistake. So I'm going to create the container registry next. So which is the command? You can see AZACR create, and then I need to pass the resource group and whatever the container registry. I'm going to create a container registry with the basic plan because I'm not going to have multiple images. But if you're going for a production environment where you have multiple container images, then you need to go for a higher plan. As you can see, it has created this particular container registry, right? The next step, what I need to do is that I need to create a login to my container registry. So I'm going to log into my container registry using the AZACR login command and then pass in the container registry. You can see that it is going to authenticate and give the container registry details, which is going to take few seconds, I hope. If you're trying, you can try with me as well so that you will get the real experience of how to create these resources in Azure. The next step, what I'm going to do is to create a service principal. So if you ask me, service principal is one of the way to authenticate with your container registry or even with AKS, which I talk about the security integration, right? So you can create service principal for your application in order to authenticate with container registry. So I'm going to create the service principal in this scenario with the rollback access control provided. So you can see it is going to create a particular JSON file generated for me. You can see the JSON file which contain app ID for this Node.js web API. I need to copy this in order to not to miss this particular details. So, and the next step is to create the role assignment for this ACR. So what I'm going to create is to create the role assignment so that I will have access to that particular container registry. I need to pass the app ID. So I'm going to copy this app ID, copy it. and then I need to pass the role as a reader for this environment. I'm making a mistake. So I'm passing the scope as, role as the reader, and then I need to pass this ID of the ACR. So you can get this ID from the previous command. I'm going to copy this and then pass the ACR details. You need to pass a full namespace, otherwise you will get an error saying that ACR is not valid. In this case, it is going to generate the role which is creating a way for me to access that particular ACR. The next step, what I'm going to do is to create the AKS. This is going to take some time, but I'm going to show. So in this case, I will create a AKS cluster. You can create using the portal as well. And then you can create the particular command which I'm showing right now. So if you're a developer, I would prefer to use the command so that you will be called as expert developer, right? I'm not trying to showcase, but then most of the developers would prefer to have this. So I need to pass the service principal, which I have created here. So I'm going to pass this principal ID here so that I won't have any issues. This is, I need to pass the service principal so that I will have the right access. I'm just making sure that I'm passing the correct ID, and then I need to pass the client ID as well. So in this case, the client ID is the one which we already generated. So I'm going to copy this particular client ID. So that this step-by-step instruction is provided in my GitHub. If you miss any of the steps, you can go and create after this session as well. So, AKS is going to be created. It might take 5 to 7 minutes, but let me see if you have any questions. But before that, I would like to show the portal experience as well. So if you are a new developer who want to explore AKS, I have some issues. Let me if you are a developer, you might be having some trouble to execute those commands. I would show a simpler way to create your AKS cluster from here. You might go and search in the marketplace, or you might go in type in the search bar to create your AKS cluster, where you will have a way to create your AKS cluster. You can create in two ways. One of the recent feature which was added using the managed Azure AD AKS environment, and the first one which was available in the previous versions as Kubernetes cluster, you can create it directly without Azure AD managed. So the difference is that the AKS cluster will have Azure AD integration in the second scenario which I showed, but the first scenario is without the Azure AD integrated. So you just need to pass few variables, and then you need to pass how many nodes that you want to have in your environment. By default, I would recommend to have it in 2 nodes if you're creating any production environments. But if you are creating any Kubernetes cluster in your demos environments, I would recommend you to use 1 in order to avoid high pricing. And then you need to provide the authentication networking. If you're creating a VNet, then you need to create that here. And if you want to integrate with any of the other services such as Cosmos DB, such as Azure AD, then you need to create that. So if you don't want to have troubles creating those commands, you can come and create that here as well. Oh, there was an error. All right, I'm getting an error on the service principal. I need to validate that whether I'm passing the correct service principal. I think 5D7, that is correct. And then client secret. Client secret. Okay, I need to pass the secret, which is the password. I think I have passed the app ID, which is wrong. I need to copy this and then pass the client secret. In live demos, this happens, which doesn't mean that everyone makes the same mistake. If you're trying, probably you might have the cluster created. So I'm passing the client secret and then creating the cluster. Let me see if I'm passing the correct details. Again, service principal, passing the principal ID and then client secret. Yes. It is going to take few minutes, but I will switch off that particular environment and then come back. So if you're a new developer, this is the way to create your Kubernetes environment. And the other ways to create is that there is something called Azure starter projects. This is for someone who doesn't have a developer experience even, right? So it is called the starter projects. If I'm correct, DevOps starter, yes. So if you're a developer who doesn't know anything about Azure, this is the place that you need to come into, where you will have a templates provided in order to deploy your services on any environment. So you can pick your language or framework. Let me check if it's running. Yeah, it's running for a few minutes. So that you can pick your particular framework or the service, and then you need to create next, and then where you want to this is a framework that you want to have your code on top of. It could be on ASP.NET or ASP.NET Core, and then if you want to attach a database, you can bring that. And if you want to deploy it as a function app, or if you want to deploy it on a web app, and if you want to deploy in virtual machine, you can do that. So these are kind of simple way to deploy your solutions on AKS without having the prior knowledge on any of the containerization, any of the developer experience. It is going to take few minutes. I think it's running. Let's wait for a few seconds. Before that, let me containerize my application, right? Oops, again, I'm getting a few error. Okay, I think I'm having some troubles. Let me check my application ID just to make sure that I am passing the correct ID. I'm going to Azure port, Azure AD. The application I created is that Azure CLI, this particular one. I'm going to search for the applications. You can do the same if you are getting the same error. It should be under the app registrations, and then you can search in the owned application. Oops. All right, there is one created at A17. Let me make sure that it's the same. Yeah. Let me verify the values are correct. So I have a object ID. So this should be the client ID. And then I have the object ID and then the secret that I already got. So let me validate that. It starts with 6. I think I'm passing a wrong value there. What is the service principal ID? Client ID is not okay. I think I'm passing wrong value. Hopefully I should not see any errors. Otherwise, due to the time, probably I can go to the next demo. Just validate if I'm passing the right value. If someone find any issues in the way I'm passing the values. Is it a case the cluster is right, service principal is right, principal ID is right, and then I have service principal created. Okay. It should not take. Okay, let me take few questions which have been asked before I creating the cluster. Is it on? Okay. Are there any questions? You can unmute yourself and ask questions. Or Pradeep, if you can read questions. Okay, there are no questions.
Yeah.
Which means you didn't understand anything, or Are there any questions?
Saji, it's evening. It's
Okay.
like not just evening, it's night. And
Okay.
about 10.
Probably what I
So,
will do is, you want me to end the session, is it?
yeah, sorry.
Do you want me to end the session, or
No,
probably you can?
no, I think we can continue to conclude the demo. I think.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Probably creating the cluster would take much time, but I'm going to explain, right? I'm finding some trouble with the client ID, but then.
Yeah, maybe next up to maybe 12 minutes would be fine, I think.
Okay. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So you can go to the repository and then have the actions, right? So what I'm doing here is that I'm creating the cluster and then creating the credentials to access that particular cluster. And then name that I have created. And I'm going to tag the container using that particular name that I have. And then I'm going to push that container image to, ACR. And then I'm going to deploy using the deploy YAML that I have. So if you're new to Kubernetes, I would recommend to install these two extension, which is very helpful for developers. The first one is the Kubernetes extension, and the second one is the containers or Docker extension. So where you will have access to all the images, all the containers that you are managing, and then second is the Kubernetes cluster, so that you will have your access to nodes and then whatever the workloads and then whatever the environments that you are managing on Kubernetes, so that as a developer you don't have to go to the portal always. You will have a direct way to manage your environment. So you can easily manage your environment, and then you can see whichever the pod is down or whichever the services are down using those extension. I wanted to demonstrate that, but let me show if I can show that to the existing cluster that I already have. So I have logged into my environment, and then I'm going to refresh this particular cluster that I already have, so that I will be able to show the cluster, so that there is a existing cluster that I already have. So once I merge this cluster in my clusters in Visual Studio Code, you can see what are the nodes that are running, what are the workloads that are running. So the second demo that I wanted to show is this, right? Multi-containerized application, which is a .NET application that is running on AKS. So you can see I have different applications running on AKS. You can see the SQL DB, and then there are 4 microservices that are running. So you can access this demo using this particular URL. Assume this cluster is running in production, and there is a error that is coming from your customer saying that I need to fix particular error. So that the extension that I wanted to show is that Azure Dev Spaces, which you can enable in your developer environment, and then you can debug. I need to disable this so that I will have access to my Visual Studio. I'm not able to see the control. Let me. Okay, let me minimize this. Yeah. So that you will get an option once you install this extension, you will get an option saying Azure Dev Spaces. In this case, it's a microservice application where I have already deployed to Kubernetes cluster using Azure Dev Ops. You can see the pipelines that I have already created, which is running on AKS, but say some customer is reporting an issue, right? So I'm going to run a similar environment from the production environment. So I'm going to create that particular cluster in my local environment, and it's going to create the same environment in my local machine, so that I can have the same visibility of the application running on production, so that I can easily debug the cluster environment in local. So it is going to give me a URL where I can access, the endpoint. where my application is running. You can see that application is spinning up. It might take few seconds to run the containers in my local environment. You are not going to create the cluster in local environment. It's going to extend whatever the cluster that is running on production. That is first thing. Let me wait for a few seconds to uh, have this up and running. So there are 4 microservices which I have created. You might have seen this application before as well. I may take few more minutes to complete this demo. On the first demo, I'm really sorry because I think I missed some variables confused, but it is very easy to deploy this particular application. I would ask you guys to go and explore this particular GitHub repository that I have already provided. So the environment is created. I'm going to access this particular cluster that is running. Okay. Demoing Kubernetes in your local environment is one of the hardest thing. Let me see if I can get this up. I think it's up. So this is the demo application, which is a microservice application on a .NET Core. And then if I log in, I need to get the credentials. I think there was a place that I had. Yep, it's user. I'm going to log in as a user so that as a developer, I will have the visibility on what is the error that is causing. So you can see that error, right? I mean, you can see that URL, which is extended from the Kubernetes cluster that is running in production, so that you will have a similar pods running for this cluster as well. So if I go to patience, I'm in debug mode. Let me. So you can see that breakpoint is getting hit, so that you can debug the live environment in your local machine without creating the cluster. So in this case, you can see that the users are in the ascending order, but if you go here, the users are not in the ascending order, right? Say this is a issue reported by the customer, then you need to immediately go and fix, so that you can add your breakpoint here, and then you can see that there is a mistake that I have made as a developer where I'm missing the order by command, so that I can immediately add the order by command, and once I add it, I can commit my source code, so it is going to spin up the CI/CD pipeline at the backend, and then you can have a zero downtime deployment without causing any downtime to your production cluster. All right, I think I have come to the end of the session, but before I wind up, I think we have few minutes. Probably if Deepak, Pradeep agrees, we can go for this quiz. I just want to make sure that everybody understood the concepts. If you agree, we can go for a Kahoot quiz. I have a what is this wireless charger. I can give it to the winner when I visit Nepal next time. Can we go on a quiz, Pradeep?
Yeah, sure.
All right. You can open up your mobile phones if you have mobile phones and visiting this link kahoot.it. I always do this, right? Just to make sure that if my session is boring, at least you get something out of this Kahoot quiz. Let me navigate to this quiz. I would recommend you to go to this particular URL, kahoot.it, and then you can type this pin, which is 495374. I will start the quiz if I have at least 5 players. I know it's sleeping time. Most of us are sleepy. Even I had a long week and it's Friday. At least we must have 5 users so that we can start this quiz. Okay, I see that users are coming. One more. I have 5 questions based on the previous sessions also, so that you understood. One more. By the time, if you have any questions, I would like to take them up. You can unmute and then ask your question. Or if you have any feedbacks, feel free to add. Can anyone say, did you like the session or is it boring or waste of time? Except Pradeep. I think he was the only one who was responding. Okay. All right, we have 6 players. Let's start, right? Okay, at least I got one feedback, interesting one. It was fun. Okay, that's nice to hear. All right, the first question, which one is not a container offerings on Azure? So I described on certain offerings or certain services which are available on Azure. You can pick the right answer. AKS, EKS, Service Fabric, or all of the above. Wow, all of them give the right answer. That's very good. I think you must be aware of the Amazon Web Services. All right, the next question is around which of them is not a container advantage. So I talked about container advantages. It's about faster iteration, whether if you're a developer, you can deploy things faster. It's about immutability, it's about cost savings, or it's about slow deployment. Someone is bursting crackers. I don't know. Okay, the right answer is the slow deployment. You know, when you go for a continuous deployment, it provides you a faster way to deploy things. The next thing is around, I think, Saji fan. Who is that? I don't know. All right, the next thing is about Azure DevOps can be used to deploy application to other clouds. So you have seen one of the session from the previous speaker. So do you agree whether Azure DevOps can be used to deploy your application to other clouds? If you're an AWS fan, if you're a GCP fan, whether you can use Azure DevOps. Wow. Give a round of applause.
Saji, I cannot see anything on my screen, so I'm always on the last. Please.
But I'm sharing the screen.
Yeah, but it's saying that it's time up. That's it. It's not over just yet.
Okay.
Maybe it's because of the network issue or something.
Okay. I think we have passed 4 questions, so right.
No
worries.
Okay.
All right. The next question, I think I have 2 more questions. Madan is leading. Which you have an Azure environment that contains 10 web application. To which URL you should connect to manage all those resources, whether it's stackoverflow.com, whether it's port.azure.com, whether it's portal.azure.com.
Please share your screen. I cannot see anything.
Okay, I think I stopped sharing because. Can you see it now? I think the time was over, so there was one response, right? Sorry about that. Yeah. And the final question for the day. I think we have 2 more questions. Best way to deploy an application that has unpredictable spikes. So I talk about if you're getting multiple users on your production environment, if you're getting spike all of a sudden, what is the best way to deploy your solution? Whether it's serverless, whether it's containers, whether it's virtual machine. If you feel too tough, wow, I got 3 right answers. Serverless is the way to go. And finally, the final question for the day. I think it's a very easy one, right? Who is the CTO for Microsoft Azure? Whether it's Pradeep Nadella, whether it's Satya Chandan, whether it's Milan Guthrie, or whether it's Mark Ruzinovich. You can pick the CTO of Microsoft Azure. This person is very interesting. I would recommend you to follow him on Twitter. Wow. You should give a gift to Pradeep. You should give a gift to the person who answered Pradeep Nadella. Yeah. So the right answer is Mark Ruzinovich. As you can see, he's the CTO for Microsoft Azure. Let's see who the winner is. Ashish is leading at 3rd position. 2nd place goes to Saji Fan, and the 3rd one, first one goes to, I think, Madan. Yeah, so you can get this power bank whenever we meet me. After this COVID things goes up, right? Finally, I want to thank all of you. I know it's too late for everyone, but thanks for having me in this, session. I was really loving it, and also, it was fun to have this quiz thing. I hope you can see these slides, but let me wind up with these few slides I wanted to share. My machine got stuck up because I was, I will have 2 more minutes. Let me share the screen again. So that you will get some few resources before the, hackathon, so that you will have access to those resources and then, learn all those things. I need to quickly jump. This is like a recap so that you will have those in mind. So we talk about all this and then we finished. So if you want to start with Kubernetes, go to this particular URL, and then there are some best practices if you are running on, production workloads, best practices, and then we have microservices recommended practices, and you can start using free, and some of the case studies are available in this URL. And if you like my session, go ahead and rate my session using this particular URL, which I would appreciate if I get feedback so that I can improve in the next session. I wish all the best, all the very best for the hackers who are hacking at the Quantum Hack, and it has been a very pleasant experience for me to share my experience. I know demo sucks at when we are doing AKs in real time, but you can go ahead and have those GitHub repositories and do at your home. If you have any questions, I am available on any mediums. You can reach out to me anytime. Even I'm a mentor at the Quantum Hack. You can ping and ask questions if you are building any of those workloads, and have fun session tomorrow, and hope you enjoyed the session. Thank you very much. If you don't have any questions particular to this session, I will wind up unless Pradeep has any specific thing to share. Yeah. Thank you very much. Over to you, Pradeep. Saji, please.
I'm sorry about that. Thanks a lot, Saji, for your wonderful, very insightful, very informative session today. Really loved it, and I hope that all of us in the call today loved your session. And beyond that, I would like to also thank all other speakers today, including Madan, Saroj, and Chandan. I'm not sure if all of us are in the call right now, but let's have a round of applause to everyone in this call today.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah.
Congratulations for organizing this as well.
Yeah, and guys, if you do not want to miss our upcoming sessions, please join Nepal Cloud Professionals group. There's a Facebook group, there's a meetup group, you can follow us on Twitter, LinkedIn, everywhere we are. And beyond that, let's enjoy Quantum Hack in the upcoming hours. Yeah, thank you so much, guys. Bye bye.